can a bare trailer become a home in just 5 weeks? This project began as a bold and borderline insane challenge to build a fully functional micro-camper. The bare frame was gradually transformed into a compact off-grid home on wheels, rugged, self-sufficient, and ready for the open road. Brackets for the leaf springs go on first, followed by the springs themselves. With those in place, the axle is set carefully on top and locked in with U-bolts. Four heavy-duty scissor jacks are mounted, but one at each corner. These will let the camper sit level on uneven ground and keep it steady once parked. To install the jacks properly, custom brackets are made. A square steel tube is cut to length, drilled for mounting holes, and cleaned before receiving 3 coats of spray paint to protect against rust. While the paint cures, temporary wheels are bolted on. Once dry, the painted brackets are fastened to the trailer with bolts, washers, and lock nuts. A layer of thread locker ensures nothing loosens while the trailer's in motion. 4 stabilizer jacks might look like overkill, but the builder has resale in mind. Extra features mean extra value. With the trailer now reinforced, shift focuses to the subfloor. Sheets of 1/2-inch plywood are cut to size and laid across the frame. Because some bolts sit higher than the surface, their locations are marked and drilled out so the plywood can sit perfectly flush. The sheets are then flipped over and given 2 thick coats of exterior-grade paint, sealing the underside against moisture. Once dry, a bead of construction adhesive is spread along the frame, and the panels are screwed down with exterior-grade fasteners. To prep for installation, thin wooden slats are attached on top, forming a grid. This adds strength to the floor while creating neat compartments for the insulation panels. Rigid foam insulation 1/2 inch thick with an R value of 3.2 is cut to fit each compartment. The panels slot in tightly, trapping air to help regulate temperature inside the camper. A final sheet of plywood locks the insulation in place, completing a strong, well-insulated subfloor. The builder tests the structure with a step inside. It already feels solid. Next, a pressure-treated 2x4 is placed to act as the base plate for the camper walls. A groove is cut into the beam so walls can sit neatly inside it instead of being fastened only along the trailer's edge. The 2x4's bolt and attention turns to the wall design. Full sheets of plywood are laid out, and the camper's outline is sketched onto the surface. Cutting the walls became one of the most nerve-wracking steps so far. Every cut had to be exact because both sides needed to mirror each other perfectly. 2 large plywood panels stood complete, almost identical in symmetry. They were set into the grooved base and braced upright with scrap wood. To divide the space, a center wall was cut, drilled with pocket holes, and secured between the sides. The front wall followed, glued and screwed, locking the structure together. Inside, the footprint now measured 5 feet wide by just over 6 feet long, enough for most people to stretch out and sleep comfortably. Next came prepping the walls for insulation. Thin wooden slats were cut and fastened inside, leaving cavities for the panels that would come later. But progress wasn't without setbacks. The first screws punched straight through the trailer's frame, forcing the team to regroup with shorter fasteners. Once corrected, work resumed smoothly. Overhead, 2x2 beams were cut and secured every 6 inches, forming a strong ceiling support grid. Pocket screws were driven from the outside, ensuring the interior would stay free of visible holes once complete. With the frame ready, a large plywood sheet, painted black, was lifted onto the roof. The roof added noticeable strength, turning the walls and ceiling into a solid unified shell. Meanwhile, the interior walls were prepared. Smooth finished plywood was measured and cut. The roof was revisited, this time for ventilation. A hole was cut to house a vent fan, with extra beams added around it to carry the weight and stresses of travel. Additional openings were drilled for recessed LED lights, and 12-volt wiring was fed through the ceiling and into the walls, where a switch would later be mounted. To finish, pine slats were ripped into thin strips, ready to form a lighter, more elegant ceiling covering. The slats were stained for warmth and left to dry. Once ready, they were glued and nailed with even 1-inch gaps, giving the ceiling both texture and depth. The holes for recessed lights were drilled through from the inside, and the fixtures were clipped. Wiring was connected and crimped together on the roof, completing a 6-light system that casts an even glow across the space. For extra brightness, an LED strip was planned beneath one of the cabinets. A quick test proved the system worked. The camper had power and working lights. Before installation, the rest of the wiring was routed through the ceiling. Rigid foam panels were then fitted over the wires. With the shell secured, focus shifted to storage, starting with an overhead cabinet for the back wall. Plywood was cut, drilled, and joined into a sturdy frame. Though cabinetry wasn't the builder's strength, thick plywood promised durability if cut carefully. This build also pushed new ground: inlay doors. Without a CNC, outlines were traced and cut by hand with a jigsaw. Recessed lights went overhead, brightening the rear space. Next came the flooring. Pre-cut vinyl was glued, rolled flat, and left to cure, creating a tough, low-maintenance surface. Once set, work began on the camper's power supply. At its heart were two 200 amp-hour lithium batteries wired in parallel, delivering 400 amp-hours at 12 volts. Heavy 2-gauge cable ran from the positive terminals to the master shutoff and into the bus bar, where the inverter, solar controller, and fuse panel would tie in. Breakers were added for safety. Wiring for lights, switches, and the future water pump was routed to the fuse panel, neatly organized with each circuit fused separately. To track performance, a shunt was installed on the battery's negative side, linking the bank to a bus bar and feeding data to a monitor that would later be mounted in cabinetry still under construction. That cabinetry came next. Plywood cut, sanded, and joined, with vent holes routed in for the refrigerator. After careful assembly, the unit was secured. With storage ready, the inverter was installed, a 2,000-watt pure sine wave unit converting DC to 120-volt AC. It was tied into the bus bar through a breaker. When powered on, the system came alive. Meanwhile, attention turned to the finish. Every screw hole was filled and sanded, followed by primer and a bright coat of paint that transformed the interior from raw plywood to an inviting space. Work paused overnight to let the paint cure. By morning, focus had shifted upward to the roof. Sheets of 1/4-inch plywood were measured, cut, and set on the crossbeams. Each screw was recessed so it could later be hidden beneath filler and fiberglass. A second sheet of plywood followed, positioned so the roof would have only one central seam. Before fastening it down, the solar wires were routed through the panel, ensuring everything was ready for connection. The wires were stripped, capped with ferrules, and linked into the charge controller. This system was designed around a 200-watt solar panel, regulated by a high-capacity 60-amp charge controller. With solar wiring in place, attention shifted back to the floor. A second sheet of vinyl was rolled out, adhesive spread across half the subfloor at a time. A large plywood panel was slid into the frame and screwed. Additional beams were drilled through to allow electrical wiring to pass neatly between sections, keeping the system clean and accessible. With structural support secure, the remaining wall panels were installed. Openings were cut for electrical outlets, including a 120-volt socket positioned in the front. Once insulated and sealed with more plywood, the camper's walls began to close in, transforming the bare frame into a real enclosed cabin. By this stage, the structure was fully wrapped in plywood and complete in shape, ready for exterior finishing. Hours went into sanding every seam and edge smooth before reinforcement began. Epoxy resin mixed 5:1 with hardener and thickened with sawdust to a peanut butter consistency was piped along joints and imperfections. Spread like frosting, it sealed cracks, smoothed transitions, and created a watertight barrier against future leaks. Openings for the heating and cooling unit were cut, then left as the filler cured into a rock-solid surface.
So it's officially the next day, and the filler seemed to have dried up really nice. So now we're going to sand the entire thing to get it nice and smooth before adding our sheets of fiberglass.
The next day, the body was sanded again and brushed with resin. Sheets of fiberglass cloth were draped across the shell, followed by another coat of resin to saturate the fibers and bond them to the plywood.
So we finished fiberglassing and let it sit overnight, and it seems to have took onto the plywood really well. Now we're going to do another layer, let it sit outside all day and bake in the sun, and then tomorrow we'll check it out and possibly sand it. If not, we'll wait another 24 hours to get it all sanded up and then finally paint it.
After curing overnight, a second coat of resin was rolled on under the sun. While the exterior cured, progress shifted indoors. The rear cabinets were painted for a clean finish, and pine planks were cut, flattened, and glued into a countertop slab. Once cured, openings were cut for the sink and compact refrigerator. The surface was sanded smooth, stained warm, and fitted with a piano hinge, allowing one section to lift like a panel. With the countertop complete, a 12-volt water pump was installed, compact, efficient, and easy to replace thanks to lever-style connectors. Nearby, trim was prepared to hold the battery monitor and a 120-volt outlet, adding both function and polish. The next morning brought the most difficult task yet, the side doors. Unlike walls or cabinets, they had to seal tightly against rain, swing smoothly, and support windows without warping. Grooves were cut to seat stainless steel hinges, 3 per door for lasting strength. By evening, after a full day's effort, the first door was mounted for a test fit.
So it's 7 p.m. and it's starting to get dark. We've been working on these doors all day long, and we finally got one on to test fit it to see how it works before we fiberglass it. And we're really happy at the way that they're turning out. The window opens and closes really nice. It's got a lock and all that good stuff. So now we're going to take them off and fiberglass it.
A coat of epoxy resin was rolled onto the bare plywood, followed by layers of fiberglass cloth. Another coat of resin saturated the fibers, leaving the door to cure overnight. While it hardened, work shifted back inside to the climate system. A custom cabinet was built to house a compact unit. It could run for up to 8 hours on a single charge, making the camper independent and efficient in any season. Next came the rear entry door. Thick plywood panels were cut and reinforced with 2x2 supports to form the frame. Once assembled, it was temporarily mounted to check its alignment and swing. Additional plywood panels were fixed across the frame, building a sturdy foundation ready for finishing. The seams and gaps of the rear door were filled with the same epoxy and sawdust mixture used earlier in the build. Once cured, the surface was sanded smooth and sealed beneath layers of fiberglass resin. This reinforcement was left to cure for 3 days, ensuring it would hold strong against the elements. When the fiberglass had finally hardened, a grueling new challenge began: sanding the camper shell. Suited in protective gear, the builder worked methodically with coarse grit sandpaper, leveling every surface. It was hot, exhausting, and relentless, but by the end, the camper's body was perfectly prepared for its protective coating.
So I got the entire camper sanded really nice and masked up. Now I'm going to paint the entire exterior with this Raptor liner. It should give the exterior of this camper a nice rugged feel, so hopefully it comes out really nice.
That protection came in the form of a rugged liner. The two-part mixture was shaken and sprayed across the entire shell, coating it in a textured armor built to endure years of use.
All right, so we finally got this thing fully lined. Now we're gonna wait about 24 hours so that we can finally put the doors on, the solar panels, and just finish this camper up, because it's been about 3 weeks and I'm freaking exhausted.
At last, the finishing touches began. Sealant was laid around the edges of each window before they were pressed into place. Hinges and locks followed, securing the doors to the camper and transforming the project from rough build to real camper. Exterior lights were next set into pre-drilled holes, sealed against moisture and wired. Attention then turned to the roof ventilation system. An air fan was installed, its brackets sealed with roofing adhesive and reinforced around every edge and screw. Once the unit was locked into place, wiring was connected inside, and a trim ring gave the installation a clean finish. When the blades finally spun to life, it marked another major milestone. The camper could now breathe. Next came power from above. A 200-watt solar panel was mounted on the roof, sealed against leaks and wired into the system. With renewable energy secured, plumbing followed. A 6-gallon freshwater tank for the sink and a gray water tank below for drainage, completing the camper's water system. Rain guards were fitted above the doors. Stock wheels swapped for larger rims and wheels. New fenders added. And a heavy-duty trailer jack installed for easier maneuvering. With tanks filled and every detail checked, the moment of truth arrived.
So the camper's finally finished up. We have it hooked up to the truck. Now we're gonna take it on its first test drive and cross our fingers that it runs good.
Hitched to the truck, the camper rolled out for its first test drive. The engine pulled strong and the build rode with confidence. The final stop was a weigh station. One last number to confirm before the project could be declared complete.
All right, so we just finished test driving it and it runs really well. Now we're at the cat scale place and we're gonna weigh it up and find out how much it weighs, so let's do it.